NEWS.MC on Monaco Info is brought to you by Monaco Legend Properties. Our exclusive interview with the personalities making the Principality.
My name is Seb Delanney. I make YouTube videos. So I was born, it started very close to here in Nice, and I grew up in La Turbie. I ended up going to school actually in Drap, a bit in the mountains, 45 minutes probably from where I was living in La Turbie. We did classes in the morning and then outdoor activities in the afternoon. So it was on a farm, so we would take care of the farm there. There were horses, there were all these things. So I think my parents wanted me to have a very outdoor experience. English mother, American father, and I grew up, speaking English at home, but obviously growing up in the south of France, picked up French throughout the years and always been close to Monaco and always seen Monaco as this kind of mythical place that was, not too far away where I could hear the F1 cars when the races were on, and grew this obsession with automobiles from 6-7 years old. I went to FANB in Monaco on the Rock for my first years of collège. I then went to Nice, to the international school in Nice, to switch to the international baccalaureate, to IB, which just matched better what I wanted to do then. I could choose my subjects a little bit more and tailor my schooling to that. And then a family friend, while I was in Nice, tells me about this school in Wales, which was very different to what I've experienced before, but interested me a lot. It was very international, so a boarding school. Looks like Hogwarts. It was in a castle and had a real emphasis on bringing all the different cultures from all around the world together in one place. And yes, I went there until passing my IB, which I passed, which I got, which I was happy about. And then I went to university in Madrid, or close to Madrid, at IE University, which I really enjoyed actually. But I ended up staying only one semester because, I enjoyed the experience there a lot. I learned a lot even in the semester I was there. But this is about the period where my work, my business and YouTube started taking off. And I was on a 4-year course. Why don't I take 1 year out, see how it goes with work, and if it doesn't work out, I'll come back. So that was my schooling. I think from a young age, probably from 12, 13. I started making YouTube videos when I was 13. I don't think I ever really knew exactly what I wanted to be, but I knew what I didn't want to be, which was, I didn't really want to be sat in an office and be doing something that I didn't really enjoy every day. I was very curious, I think, when I was younger, of wanting to just learn about different industries and surf the wave of interest until we see where it drops us off, kind of thing. I started making videos when I was 13, I think. 13, 14, along those lines. It would have been just just a car driving on the streets of Monaco somewhere. My dad was working at the ATP, who organized, tennis, and they have their offices in Monaco. And often I would ask him, to come with him to the office, because then I would be able to see from the window all these cars. Or he would say, okay, go, see the cars for an hour while I'm finishing some emails, etc. And I would just film any cool car that I would see. And it was rare. It was a lot more rare back then to see supercars than it is today. Monaco is one of the only places where you could genuinely see, supercars in the wild every day. YouTube wasn't even a thing really then. So just to give an example, we wouldn't put titles on the videos. There was no thumbnails. It would just be the file name of the video. So the video on YouTube would be image 38, 6, 7, whatever. Some people who are older than I was, who started understanding more the potential business of YouTube down the line, started posting more developed, what we now call vlogs, which back then we didn't really know what to call them. And I started watching these. So there's a YouTuber called Shmee150, who's still very well known today. And I would watch his videos, from La Turbie. He was based in London, and I found this really cool. So, got in touch and met him and was able to start making videos of my own in this area. And little by little, we're talking maybe 3 years later. So there's, a big gap of just making videos just for the pleasure of doing it. Another reason I was doing it was because my family in the UK liked cars and there wasn't WeTransfer or anything to send them videos. So I would put them on YouTube and send them the link. So there wasn't any other thought other than just so that my cousins or my grandfather could see the videos, until I started hanging out with these other YouTubers, which wasn't even a word really when we first started. And they taught me, if you get your views up, then maybe one day someone will want you to wear their cap or wear their clothes or talk about their brand or whatever it may be. And so that helped me a lot because, I was, at this point, I'm 16 or 15, 16. And as much as you can claim in the future, you know, like, yeah, I knew this was all going to happen, I had no idea. You know, I was just doing it because it was fun and I could hang out with the friends that I was doing this with. And yeah, thanks to their guidance, it then grew into something a lot bigger later. The transition, I think, happened a lot quicker than anyone expected. And there was a big side for me of being in the right time at the right place, for sure. But that allowed me to have a first-hand look at the advantages of this transition. You know, the biggest example I would give is that we had very precise data. So when YouTube first started really developing big numbers that could be alongside the numbers of radio or TV or newspapers, we were able to have a lot more data because the way the algorithms are developed, we can trace down a lot more who's watching the content, how long they're watching it for, where they live, how old they are. That has a certain value. And that's where the transition, I noticed it the most at first, is if I would go to an advertiser and they'd say, you know, we pay X for this amount of views. We were usually about 20% of the cost, you know, for the same amount of views. And we were able to give a lot of data with that. If we had 10,000 views or 100,000 views, we can tell you where 80% of those were watched, in which countries, in which language, for how long, which, for example, with a magazine is hard to know. But for sure, I was there for those first days of us figuring out, okay, you know, here's the advantage we can give, here's what we can't propose, which these other platforms can. How do we build our businesses around that? And that was really fun. And since, you know, helping also other friends who were coming up in YouTube and explaining, you know, this, because you will learn about your audience whilst advertising. When we were talking earlier about the transition from, you know, TV and more traditional media to social media, the one thing we were missing was credibility. 10, 15 years down the line, we're starting to see that come in even with social media. You know, a lot of brands that we'll work with, they can work with people who have more views right now, but who started a year ago, 2 years ago, and kind of understood the current algorithm well and will get a lot of views. I have a lot of brands that I'll work with. I know that's a priority, is, you know, we would like to kind of have that seal of approval on, you know, whatever product they're making. I was so very lucky with my parents, the way they reacted. At first, it was a hobby, you know, and they were saying, look, we'd rather he's out, you know, with his friends filming cars, he's outside, he's not playing video games or whatever. And I remember when all my friends started going out more and going to clubs for the first few times, and I was outside of the club filming the cars that were parked there. They were like, we'd rather he's filming the cars outside than participating inside. So it was, as a hobby, they supported it and had no problem with it. When it became a little bit more than a hobby and started impacting how much time I was spending on school, or especially when I went to university or things like this, today it's easy to think back and say, yeah, but you know, YouTube is something where you could earn a living. Back then it wasn't the case. So it really was just, you know, okay, this hobby could impact your future career instead of, you know, in a negative way instead of in a positive way. But I think they saw that I kind of needed this creative side to me, that I would get really angsty and nervous and unpleasant, I think, if I wasn't able to like create something and work on some sort of project. So they let me do it until the day where I dropped out of university, and I didn't tell them at first. So I still remember the conversation where I'd taken the decision, I'd already dropped out. I go see my mum at first, who comes to me, she's like, something's not okay. You know, and I say, look, I'm not going back to university. I really think this YouTube thing could become something. And then we spoke to my father, and I was worried about how they would react. They really took the time to think, okay, so it's done, you're doing this, what's the business plan? And I knew I would have to show a business plan of this is how I think it could work. So I had that ready. Once they saw that, they said, well, look, if it's done, there's no point us fighting against you. If it doesn't work in a year, you go back. You know, we're here to support you. Obviously, this is a big decision, and almost we would have rather you felt comfortable enough to come talk to us about it. We're here to support you if it's something that makes you happy. So, you know, my dad, who'd worked a lot in marketing, was saying, look, you're gonna have to start working with brands, send me the contract so I can see if they're gonna, you know, try and slip any nasty little clauses into the contract. My mum had worked for the BBC, producing documentaries and films for a long time, so I can help you with the production side. So they weren't there every day helping, but if I needed to pick up the phone and ask someone for advice on whether it's the production or the business side, I had that support. And that I'm unbelievably lucky about. And it protected me so much, because when you're 18, I just turned 18 at this point. I didn't really know what I was doing, working with brands and this whole side. The audience that have followed me now, some of them have followed for 10 years, you know, 12 years. So I've grown up, they've grown up, and it's always been around cars. It will always be, I mean, it's my first love is cars, you know, my passion is for the industry and the cars that I'm able to drive. So we'll always navigate around that, but I don't want to make it too dry, too technical, because the type of content I enjoy making and is the way I like talking about cars is sitting down with some friends and just chatting about it. And, you know, not just about the fastest 0 to 60 and this and that, too technical. Doesn't interest me too much. It's how it makes you feel. Why do you love this car? You know, we filmed over 1,000 videos and my interests have evolved throughout the years. So I also want to show, you know, my life as a YouTuber, as an automotive fan, outside of just the cars themselves. So sometimes for a car event, we'll travel to an amazing place. Sometimes cars are very linked to the watch industry, to the boating industry. That develops different passions. So we'll be filming a video about a car, but look, this car has an interesting story with this watch. Let's talk about this watch. Okay, you know, this car had the same designer as this boat. Let's talk about this boat. So recently I've gotten really interested in boats. I've been talking more about boats. You know, I love different sports. We'll talk about that and you know, just make it as authentic as possible. Look, this interests me. Hopefully it interests you guys too. Let's give it a go. Let me know what you think is the way that we'll make the videos. Along the way, I've also met some incredible people who are amongst those followers. My closest friend today is someone who used to watch my YouTube videos and came to speak to me when I was on holiday once, and it's today one of my best friends in the world. A lot of the people that I'll collaborate with today will be people I've met through social media, through the work that I've done on there. A lot of the cars that we filmed were cars of subscribers. And so, you know, it's a big number, but for some reason it still feels like a relatively close-knit community. I hope that no matter how big it gets or if it becomes smaller, I don't know that we're able to keep that. My advice is, and I think always will be, don't try and be someone else, you know, try and be, because often you'll see someone who's doing really well and you'll think, I'll do that. But they're doing well now, and this world, social media changes so quickly. So it's not because they're doing well this month, that next year, in 2 years, in 3 years, they'll be doing well. You know, find something that interests you genuinely, that you feel hasn't quite been explored yet. I feel everyone expects it to be, you know, if I start now in 3 months' time, I want to have 50,000 followers, 10,000 followers. My advice would be authentic, be consistent, and be patient, would be the 3 things. When I think of the years to come, there's, you know, the business side, and the personal, obviously. In the personal, I'd love to build a family. It was very intense from 16 to 29. One of the advantages of that is to maybe be able to now have a little bit more time and do the things that I wasn't able to do when I was a little younger. Work-wise, I've tried over the years, and I think it's what a lot of YouTubers try and do, is diversify as much as you can, because you're aware of, am I going to want to make YouTube videos, you know, when I'm 50, 60, 40, whatever it may be. I love making the videos. But if I'm being completely honest, I'd like to be at a stage where I don't have to make the YouTube videos for the earnings that come with it. There's always the notion of, if I'm going to diversify, what will I diversify in? I have a business in textiles, which I do next to YouTube. We started two and a half years ago, which is growing really nicely. So in the next few years, I'd love to grow that. But so yeah, so trying to just build keep building the social media as it goes, because that's my core. That's what opened all the doors. That's what I love. But not be naive and think that I'll do that forever, and at least learn in other industries and see how that goes. It's incredible how much Monaco, when you travel, makes you want to come back to it more. Having grown up in La Turbie, lived, you know, until I was 15, I was in La Turbie my whole life. I had, you know, this dream one day I'd like to live in Monaco, and every time you come here, everything works, everything's clean, everyone's nice, all the cars are fancy. I'm like, wow, what is this place? You know, people actually live here, you know, it's possible. And I always had in the back of my head, this is where, you know, I'd like to live one day. But when you're 15, 16, you kind of tell yourself that, and you don't know what the future holds. And it wasn't even an option, of course, back then. So I was like, you know, why don't I go discover different areas? And with work, I was able to travel, you know, pretty much everywhere, all around the world, and then lived in different places. So I lived in LA for a while, lived in London, lived in Madrid for a little stint, lived in Geneva for many years, and was constantly traveling, spent a lot of time in Paris. So I wanted to experience different cities that interested me and see how I got along with those cities. Every time, you know, I lived in London, I loved London. I lived in Geneva, I really liked Geneva. But every time I'd come back here and I would do the drive from the airport towards Monaco or La Turbie, I would just get off the plane and think, this is pretty nice. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than this. I'd be here, and every time I'd be like, okay, I need to get on a plane and go home, you know, to London, to wherever. Okay, and after a while, talking to friends, I'm like, but, you know, Seb, if this is where you you see yourself, yeah, but if I do it, I want to do it properly, you know, I want to come back and I want to be able to live the experience of moving to Monaco the way I always envisioned it. So I waited a while, you know, I'm 29 today, I moved here a year and a half ago, but I was able to kind of come on my terms the way I envisioned moving here, with being able to have a car that I enjoy and drive around the way I used to film people driving around back in the day. And I didn't want to rush it because it's really somewhere I saw myself settling down long term. So I was like, look, if you see yourself moving there one day, then experience other things beforehand and come back when you feel ready. Yeah, 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to start traveling a little bit less with work because it was getting pretty intense. So I wanted to, you know, build more of a routine and be able to see my friends and my family more and slightly take more control of my own schedule. And when doing this, one of the decisions was, okay, where are you gonna live? And so yeah, so I started going through all sorts of different terms. Okay, I want to be somewhere where it's sunny. I want to be somewhere where, you know, my friends and family are fairly close. I need an airport nearby because, you know, I'd like it to be safe because, of course, YouTube, you're fairly exposed, and I've already had some issues with robberies and things like this. You know, of course, I enjoy it being very clean everywhere. I'd like there to be some events that I can go to. Networking needs to be important. I come from an international background. I need it to be international as well. If I want to have a family, I want good schools. I'd like a good hospital. You put all that together. I'm obviously biased because I live here, but in my opinion, there's no better place in the world. So, okay. So then I took the decision and was able to move here. And I was a little bit worried that I had built it to be this place in my mind and kind of never meet your heroes. And I'd move here and it wouldn't be as good as I hoped. And I'm not just saying this, genuinely, I think one of the best decisions I've made in my whole life, and I couldn't be happier. And that's from someone who's grown up around Monaco. And yeah, I've just built some incredible relationships here and just really enjoy my day to day. And for the first time, I feel really, since I was 14, 15 and I lived in La Turbie, I have a bit more of a routine and structure to my life. I think more and more in the future, people will understand Monaco better. There is real life here and people who don't fall into necessarily that whole stereotype of it's just a bubble and you can't spend more than 2 weeks there or you'll end up living in this crazy bubble and go nuts. The quality of cars that are driving around Monaco is insane. And not just like, of course there are some which are just these fancy cars for the sake of having a fancy car, but you see the rarest, most connoisseur level of cars. So one way of looking at it is, oh, there's just these wealthy people going around with these fancy cars all the time. Or you can go, guys, this is the most dense concentration of truly passionate, knowledgeable collectors in one place. Because you'll see cars of which there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 20, 200 in the world. The highest concentration will be here. People drive them, they take them out. Often people who haven't actually lived here or who want to give this certain image to Monaco will give it. I hope that myself, you guys, and whoever genuinely live here can play our role in actually showing the reality of it, which ironically is, I think, a lot more special than the stereotype of it.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching NEWS.MC, your English rendezvous on Monaco Info. Discover more interviews and stories on our websites, NEWS.MC and MonacoInfo.com. This show was brought to you by Monaco Legend Properties.